Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, yours truly, Awesome Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a question for you today. Listeners on the show, appreciate you tuning in. Here's the question. Who is Steve Clark, and why you should listen to him? Let me tell you, Steve Clark, he's the winner of the Marketing Campaign of the Year at the 2011 Glazer Kennedy Super Conference. He's also the founder of New School Selling, a business development and consulting firm that provides sales training and consulting to small business owners, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals. Now, Steve, this must be a typo. My notes say since 1980, hard to believe, Steve has sold pest control services, pots and pans, security systems, vitamins, laundry detergent, life and health insurance, annuities, mutual funds, stocks, and bonds, and he has raised over $1 million for the schools in Northwest Florida. Steve is the author of Profitable Persuasion, Proven Strategies for Sales and Management Success, and also the soon-to-be-released Ultimate Book on Sales. Now, Steve is the co-author with Mr. Dan Kennedy of Secrets of Peak Performers and The Ultimate Sales Secret. Steve is a frequent national and international speaker whose income ranks in the top 3% of all sales and marketing professionals worldwide. Now, in addition to his duties as the founder and CEO of his firm, Steve is a licensed U.S. Coast Guard captain who also sport fishes out of Navarre, Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Captain Steve Clark. Hey, Steve, thanks for coming on the show, my captain. And how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you having me.
You're very
welcome.
welcome.
And by the way, that's not a typo. That is actually since 1980.
You know, my oldest daughter, Rachel, often reminds me that, she's 13 and she says, Dad, that was in the 1900s. She was born in 2005, so she can get away with that one. But yeah, time flies when you're having fun, and the success trail is long indeed. Now, I have a question for you, Steve, before we get too much into the meat of the call here. It says licensed U.S. Coast Guard captain. Does that mean that you're a licensed boat captain, or does that mean that you were in the Coast Guard?
No, that means I'm a licensed Coast Guard captain. It is. So what that means is with my license, I can take up to 6 people offshore up to 100 miles, and I'm able to charge them money to be able to do that as a Coast Guard captain. I don't do that a lot. I got the license because I wanted to go through the rigorous program and learn. But it has also turned into sort of a little bit more than a hobby, but not quite a business. So I tell people all the time, I get to take people fishing, and they support my habit.
That's good. That's good. I was going to say that maybe that would be an avoidance behavior, but it sounds like you get a lot out of it, and you're not just avoiding doing the things that we all need. We should be able to focus on. Hey, I have another question for you. So 1980, that's a long time ago. Can you tell us about your upbringing as a youngster, maybe where you went to school, or how some mentors in life got you into the sales business?
Well, I'm an Army brat. My father was in the Army. I was born in France. As a young child, I lived in Germany. I lived in Japan. I lived in Maryland. I lived in Kentucky. First 6 years of my schooling, I was in 6 different schools in 6 years. So I, went all over the place. And my first introduction to selling was when I started selling greeting cards and flower seeds out of boys' life, door to door in my neighborhood, so I could win prizes. I didn't know anything about cold calling or rejection or anything. All I knew is I wanted that prize in boys' life. And then from there, I actually realized I probably had a little gift for that. And I started a paper route. And then in my junior year of high school, for the prom, We sold candy bars to raise money for the prom, and I was the number one seller out of 249 students in my junior class. And I won a whopping $15 prize for that. The sad part about that, Mike, is I went away from that for about 20 years and tried to do some other stuff. And it was only when I was 30 years old, actually on my 30th birthday, did I get into professional selling, and went from there. And as far as mentors, I realized that if you're going to be good at something, you need to be a good student. So when I got in selling, I went to the bookstore and I bought a couple of books in selling. One of them was Joe Girard's book on how to sell anything to anybody. And the other one was called Surefire Closing Techniques. And I still have those books to this day, along with hundreds of other books that I've picked up along the way.
Wow, that's a terrific story. And it's interesting, Steve, the more guests that I have on the show, you see that there's a lot of similarities. And you would be amazed, or maybe not, but I'm very amazed at how many folks actually sold either newspapers, which might not have really have been a sale. It might have been more of a service. I mean, once you got the account, you had to go collect and such. But they've sold candy bars. And it starts out in Little League, or it starts out in the school system. But that courage that you had to have to go door to door, to go knock on a door and to make an offer, that is something that really is I don't know if it was trained. I don't know if it was trained into me, but it just something that kind of happened inherently. Now, I've read that you actually say that most sales training doesn't even work. Can you talk about that? Why do you think that? Why does most sales training not work?
Well, the real secret that nobody wants to admit is that most people who are in selling do not have the psychological profile or the hardwired internal skill sets to be a top performing salesperson. And when we send folks who are ill-equipped to sales training, and we give them great sales training, and then they come back to their place of business and they don't perform, we scratch our head, and we shouldn't be surprised because they're not successful, because they really should not be in the profession in the first place. The reality is only about 20% of the people walking the face of the planet have what it takes to become a top performing salesperson. Just like very few people possess the skills that it takes to be an NFL quarterback. If you're 5'10", you're not going to make it in the NFL as a quarterback. You got to be 6'4" or somewhere in there is what they're looking for, that prototype. So salespeople are the same way, except it's a mental thing. And you talk about the fact that I wasn't scared as a kid. I did not know that you were supposed to be scared. I didn't know anything about rejection. No one ever told me I couldn't do it. And I just had the guts and the balls, quite frankly, to just go do it without any fear. And what I find with top performing salespeople is they are race horses. They're very self-confident. They're resistant to the word no. They're capable of self-management. They're self-starters. You don't have to wake them up and get them going. And if someone doesn't possess those internal hardwired skills, personal skills, they're not going to be successful. And and most people don't have those. So the reality is most people are easily discouraged. They take rejection personally. They're not self-starters. They got to be wound up and sit out the door every day. And that's not going to work if you're going to be a top performing salesperson, or quite frankly, a top performing anything.
That's very, very insightful and interesting. Most of the listeners and viewers are wholesalers or product representative, field territory sales reps, as Dan Kennedy would call them, and or financial advisors that tune into this. And there's a lot of training that goes into the job. You have to get a lot of licenses just to be able to, and as you know, selling mutual funds and annuities, you have to get a license to be able to even do that, Steve. And ironically enough, By the way, did you get licensed and all that as well? Did you have?
I spent 8 years in the financial services business as a personal producer, and I was a 3-time MDRT qualifier during those 8 years.
Yeah, there you go. Congratulations. And so you know about the licenses, and I was told, and I want to get your opinion on it though, that the higher someone scores on the licensing exam, the less likely they are to actually be successful in the job, in the career. And the logic behind it is that if you scored a 90+% or more on the exam, you're good at test taking. And if you're good at test taking, you probably had a pretty easy time through schooling, whether it was college, whether it was high school or any academia. If you had an easy time there, you probably didn't have to work that hard. And you probably didn't have to, get out there and get dirty, or maybe you were a little bit too intellectual. And those of us that scored lower, we're used to having to grind it out on everything we do. And therefore, we're able to stick it through the downtimes in a sales career as well. What do you think about that? Does that sound?
Well, I was a C student. In fact, I flunked out of college after my sophomore year, mainly because I didn't go to class, which is a guarantee you're going to flunk out. But even when I finished, I graduated college with a 2.4 GPA. And, so I'm not a really smart guy. I'm an average guy as far as intelligence is concerned. And I would never be a financial analyst because I don't have the brain power to do all of that. And I think all those guys and gals who are really, really book smart probably make great analysts. But that has nothing to do with success in selling. Success in selling is really about how badly do you want it. And the thing I like about it is that success doesn't have anything to do with who your mama and daddy were, where you went to school, how big you are, how much you weigh, what the color of your skin is, what your sexual orientation is. The world of selling could care less about any of that. It only cares about, can you close deals, and do you have the guts to go out and talk to as many people as you need to talk to in order to achieve the goal that you have in mind. It goes back to what Napoleon Hill called a burning desire. If you don't have a burning desire, nothing else matters.
Yeah, I do believe that burning desire is often what causes that spark, that effort, that compression, that energy, plus the desire causes the spark. How do you get that desire, Steve? We're all born, we're all raised in different scenarios and situations. And if I'm hearing you correctly, that doesn't even matter. What matters is the day that the switch clicks and you all of a sudden get a burning desire for success in this particular field or that particular field, which gives you the motivation and energy to actually go do it, to go pound on the doors.
Well, an example. Yeah, well, this is an example of what happened to me. I was a miserable failure in selling early on, because I really wasn't committed to it. It's just something I sort of kind of did. And the turning point for me, I had been in the sales business, at that time, about 2.5 years. And I was basically barely making a living. But I came home one day and the water company was out in front of my house and they were about to turn my water off. My wife was 8.5 months pregnant. They were going to turn my water off because I had not paid a $14.82 water bill. And I begged them not to turn the water off. They radioed into the office and explained the situation. And the office said, if he will come over here and give us $14.82, we won't turn the water off. Fortunately for me, they were only about a mile away from where I was. I went in my house and I had a mason jar full of coins that I just put in the jar every day when I came home. I counted out $14.82 in coins, and I took them over to People's Water Company and gave them their $14.82. That day changed my life because I got pissed off big time. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and I was humiliated in front of my wife, and that experience completely flipped the switch for me. And what I have found with with most top performers is they have to have something generally externally that motivates them, that kicks them, and it will either crush them and they will get out of the business and go do something else, or they will get serious about it. Now, a lot of folks don't have that experience, and folks say, "Why would you wish that sort of thing on people?" And what I would say to that is, most people don't do anything of any significance in life until they're backed into a corner, and then that's when they do something. So I think that's probably what it takes. Now, some people aren't capable of, even when they're backed into a corner, what they do is they just go crawl in a hole and take welfare.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now you're actually reinforcing something I read recently that said that we do not ascend to our greatest aspirations for ourselves. You sit down, you make these these plans and all this, call it airy fairy things that you're going to do. That's not what happened. What happens is we actually decline to our lowest level of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do. And that's that corner you're talking about, isn't it? To where you got backed into the corner.
Right. It's easier for people to lower their expectations and lower their goals than it is for them to go do what is necessary to reach the next level.
So if we're going to coach some wholesalers and some financial advisors that maybe are, call it, they're out of gas, they're like that airplane in the cartoons, they're out of gas, the things are ready to crash. How do we get them to recharge and refuel and to go to the next level?
Well, it starts with having some kind of goal of some sort. If you don't go back to that burning desire that Napoleon Hill talked about, if you do not have a burning desire to buy a new house or a new car or support an orphanage or give more money to your church or fully fund your 401k or become financially independent, if you don't have goals like that keep you awake at night, it's the first thing you think about in the morning, it's a thing you think about all day long, the thing you think about before you go to bed at night. If you don't have something that is that important to you, then you will not go out and do what is necessary to become a success. So when I find salespeople that are plateaued, they could be plateaued at $50,000 a year, $150,000 a year, $500,000 a year. When they are plateaued and not growing to the next level, it's because they have run out of reasons to make more money.
Yeah, as well said. What do you say to the gurus that are out there, Steve, that say, "Hey, Steve, just figure out what you love to do. Figure out what your passion is, and do that."
Well, my passion would be doing something like going out fishing, but I hadn't figured out how to make $500,000 or $1 million a year doing that. So, I think that's a pile of crap, actually. I think you have to do what's necessary to make money, not necessarily do what your passion is. And the reality is behavior. When you execute behavior and you do something, you will create passion. You will become passionate about what you are doing. So you don't sit and wait for your passion. You go do the activity, you do the behavior, and as you do the behavior, you will become more passionate about what it is you're doing. And it doesn't matter whether it's selling or anything else. So people got that all wrong. They got it backwards. Go do the activity and you will become passionate about the activity.
Yeah, Dan Kennedy mentioned one time that he also hasn't found anyone that would pay him a bunch of money to lay in a hammock.
Yeah, right.
Which is
right.
what his favorite passion might be. So if I'm hearing you right, you don't think that just anyone can be taught to become an outstanding salesperson, or can they?
No, I don't think anyone can be taught to become an outstanding salesperson or superstar salesperson. I think anybody can be taught to be better, but that doesn't mean their production level is going to be sufficient for them or for their organization they're working for. So the characteristics of top performing salespeople, when someone is hired, and we do a lot of this, Mike. I have tested and interviewed over 500 salespeople or sales candidates for companies that I work with. And what we have found is that even if someone has a burning desire, if they don't have the requisite things we talked about a minute ago, they're not going to be a top performer. They can get better and they will end up improving, but that doesn't mean that they're actually going to become a top performer. So let me give you sort of a handful of these real quick. These are personal talents and skills. These are things that cannot be taught. You listen to these and you tell me if you think you can teach people this. Number one, personal accountability. The opposite of personal accountability is making excuses. Can someone be taught personal accountability? Nah, I've never met anybody that could be taught that. Self-starting, resilience, self-management, a results orientation, goal achievement. Those are things that you might be able to help somebody with if you put them in intense therapy and have a whole lot of money to invest in them. But the reality is it's much easier to go out and find someone who already has those skills and teach them product knowledge and teach them sales skills, asking questions, closing, those kinds of things can be taught. But these other things, personal accountability, self-starting, resilience, self-management, results orientation, I've not found any way of getting someone who doesn't have those things to be able to teach them to do that. And the analogy I use is if you want to be a wide receiver in the NFL, if you don't run a 4.40 as a wide receiver, you ain't going to be drafted as a wide receiver. You might be a fat old boy who wants to be a wide receiver, but that dog ain't going to hunt in the NFL.
As you're going over that, just the thing that came to my mind was, was little Mikey Baker. I might have graduated being called Mike by that time, but I was 17 years old, and I don't know that I had all of those attributes, but I do feel like my drill instructor down at Fort Benning, Georgia, really helped instill a lot of those things that you mentioned into me. Now, maybe they were there and they just kind of knocked off the clay, and there I was. But I think that the military actually provides a lot of that accountability. Now, it's been a while since I've departed the military, but a lot of guys that were, that nowadays might be on their mom's couch in the basement for years, they were not able to do that because they had, the military, their leaders, in their face and helping them to become motivated. So it's kind of interesting. Have you seen any examples of that in all of the people that you've interviewed for companies? Do you find that the military might have a difference maker?
Well, I'll give you my example about that. In the summer of 19 college, I spent 10 weeks at Quantico, Virginia at Marine Corps Officer Training School with the idea that when I completed that 10-week program and went back and graduated college, then I would be offered a commission in the Marine Corps Reserve. So we started, now I was 21 years old. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was 21 years old. We started with 55 guys in our platoon. 10 weeks later, we had 23 graduate. We had over 60% of those 55 we started with not make it. Now, all 55 got the same treatment, but 60% of them were washed out. So to your point, yes, the military does provide structure and they do provide some of these kinds of things that we're talking about. But ultimately, it was up to me as to whether or not I wanted to get up and go march or not. I could have decided not to do it. In fact, after 5 weeks, they gave us the option. They call it DOR, drop on request. You could quit after 5 weeks and go home and drink beer with your buddies for the rest of the summer. No harm, no foul. And a bunch of guys did that. But again, I think what the military does is it just flushes out. It identifies the winners from the losers.
Steve, that is very well said. Appreciate that in the commentary. And, it is an interesting cycle that the sales game goes through. You know, when you started back in 1980, there was a big fat thing that was about this thick, and it would be delivered on everyone's doorstep. And if you wanted to do some business somewhere, you just crack it open and alphabetically find the business, and then you call them up, called the yellow pages or the phone
Mm-hmm.
book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've seen things kind of change, but the biggest one in our business, in the financial services business, the big change was on like 2008, 2009 with this last, huge, they call it the Great Recession. Can you kind of address the changes that have happened in selling since 2008?
Well, in a nutshell, the business of selling has become much more difficult. I am better at it than I have ever been, and yet it is more difficult to extract money from untrusting buyers, no matter what you're selling. We live in a society today that is the most distrusting society in the history of mankind. Our religious leaders can't be trusted. Our political leaders can't be trusted. Our corporate leaders can't be trusted. There's hardly a day goes by that you don't read or hear or watch something about someone who was in a position of leadership and how they failed and how they were not trusted as a result of that. So the big thing for all salespeople to understand is nobody believes anything you say. They don't believe in any claim that you make. They don't believe in anything that your marketing department puts out. And they really are very defensive. So the biggest thing in selling right now, so the thing that I'm focusing on since 2008 is teaching people who are in sales that their number one thing before they try to sell anything to anybody is to get people to know, like, and trust them before they make some sort of pitch to those people, because until people know, like, and trust you, they're not going to take a flyer on what it is that you're selling. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. Certainly technology makes it a lot easier to do that these days. But the days of cold calling and showing up on somebody's doorstep and knocking on their door or making an outbound phone call to someone who doesn't know you and never heard from you, those days are over. People, number one, aren't going to answer the phone. And number two, if they haven't known about you before they first see you and you make a call on them, they're not going to buy from you most likely unless they're absolutely in some kind of critical need.
That is a seismic shift. That is a huge change in the way that business is done, and I completely agree with you. What do you give a salesperson as a kind of a starting point to get known? And that's the biggest part, is that people don't know you. There's enough of everything out there. People aren't looking for this, something that you have. They've already invented sliced bread.
Right.
So how would you advise someone to get known? And remember that there's a pretty stiff compliance element to the listeners on this show.
Well, and I get that, because I've got, probably about 40% of my business is working and coaching individual financial advisors. So I get that. But they can still do some things. And this is a little bit of a point of contention with some, is that there are compliance issues, and then there are compliance issues. The FINRA rules are the FINRA rules. However, there's some guy sitting in a cubicle in the home office whose job is to say no. And no matter what you want to do, they're going to say no, because they get paid to say no. They are attorneys, they're CPAs, and they're bean counters. They don't think like salespeople. They don't know anything about selling. They never made a sales call in their life. And I've got a client that just retired right now. He's 66 years old. He just retired. He was $1 million a year income guy. He wrote a book. Well, every financial advisor I've talked to say, you can't write a book. You can't write a book because compliance won't agree with it. Well, this guy wrote a book. So I think that you can go out, you can go speak. You can certainly go to Rotary clubs and give some kind of 20-minute presentation of good content. You can begin to write some things. Now, again, you're going to have to deal with a little bit of compliance, but the word authority, the first 6 letters in the word authority spell author. And the ones that I know that are really doing well are out there. They're speaking, they're writing, they're producing training, they're doing workshops, they're doing all kinds of things for free in order to get people to know, like, and trust them. So everybody needs to do that, should be doing that. And I never realized that when I got in this business, how much my income was going to be tied to how well I spoke and how well I wrote. But I have worked very hard. I conservatively have spent over 2,000 hours studying since 2008. I have spent over 2,000 hours learning how to write sales copy, putting words on paper that get people to know, like, and trust me and give me money. So those are some things that folks can do. So the people that are listening to this, that are out there whose income depends on selling, need to understand that if they continue to do what's been done in the last 30, 40, 50 years or 20 years even, that they're going to have a tough time. They need to become better speakers. They need to become writers. They need to do a lot of things to project their influence into the marketplace so that people come to understand and know who they are.
Yeah, I actually, I obviously didn't think of it. Maybe I watched you say it one time and I picked it up, but I've used that. The first 6 letters of the word of authority is to become an author, and to try to write, and to try to put it out there that you said something, so that you're known as the person that stands on this, this platform or this value, or that you said that thing. It's a nice way. And then with technology, you're right. People can look at your LinkedIn profile and your Facebook profile and your Instagram profile and decide whether or not they do want to do business with you. You might be a little bit, out of their context. In fact, you might have noticed that the name of the show is The Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and I call myself Awesome Mike, Steve. And do you know why? Well, it's because
you're awesome.
Well, what it doesn't say is awe everyone. It just says to awesome. So I'm putting myself out there, and not everyone loves it, but those that do are they're worthy of it, and I do it for them.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that. Now, you talk about speaking. You talk about that. Are you telling me that I can't just pick up the phone now and bring a superior product to someone and get the business?
You can, but you won't make any money doing that. First of all, people don't believe you have a superior product in the first place. I mean, I've never heard a wholesaler say this, and I've trained a bunch of wholesalers. I've never heard a wholesaler say, we have one of the most mediocre products out there. Ours is just like everybody else's. The truth of the matter is, and nobody wants to hear this, and everybody wants to take issue with it, everyone out there is selling a commodity. I don't care who you are and what you're selling, it's a commodity. The only thing you need to know about that is if you have competitors, you're selling a commodity. You don't have anything that anybody else doesn't have. And if you do, within 30 days, your competition is going to come up with one just like it or very similar to it. So you can't hang your hat on that. The prospect, the buyer does not buy the product and understand. They understand that they trust the person that's talking to them on the phone or standing in front of them. So no matter what you sell, you are the product. And that cannot be commoditized or duplicated. And when you take the position that you're going to be in the self-promotion business, I heard Gene Simmons say this, Gene Simmons of KISS say this. He said, if you are bashful about self-promotion, you will always be broke. Said you need to get beyond being bashful about promoting yourself.
Yeah, Gene Simmons is he is definitely not bashful, and I don't know if he's the number one revenue earner, but he's got to be up there as far as rock and roll stars. I mean, the guy is really still relevant. TV shows, all of that stuff. So, kudos to him, and probably words of wisdom. You know, speaking of words of wisdom, Steve, do you have anything that we can kind of put in our pocket as far as a phrase or some words of wisdom that really resonate with you and kind of you might use as a as a beacon?
Well, uh, uh, one of the words of wisdom, Judge Ziegler. Now, most people don't know about Judge Ziegler. Judge Ziegler was the world champion cookware salesman, and that's what Zig Ziglar did before he turned into a motivational speaker. A little side note there is that most people don't know that Zig Ziglar was not a very good pots and pans salesman. Zig Ziglar was a failure at selling pots and pans, so he went into the motivation business. A whole different story. That's as Paul Harvey would say, that's the rest of the story. But anyway, Judge Ziegler coined the phrase, and many years ago when I heard it, he said, "Timid salesmen have skinny kids."
That's right.
And that kind of, to me, that says it all. That everybody I know, Mike, that makes a lot of money is a really self-confident person about who they are and what they're all about. They're not bashful at all.
Yeah, and I think it's that's the real reality check. And I've said it before that the first person that I need to convince of what I'm trying to sell is the person in the mirror.
That's exactly right.
And was it James Allen, I think, said, as I believe, I am believed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very interesting. Now, I've had a sales manager in the past tell me that they would like me to go get the biggest house and the biggest car, and two of them, if possible, because they knew that would then drive me to go sell more. And that really caused some distress. Like you're feeling distress as opposed to feeling useful stress or use stress. Can you differentiate between those two? And do you think that really even matters as far as making yourself get up and go after it?
Well, I think the best position you can be in as a salesperson is to be financially independent and not need to make a sale. Because when you don't make a sale, or when you don't need to make a sale, you don't act like a salesperson. You act like a consultant. So when a person has financial pressure, and I have had lots of financial pressure in my life. People say, "Well, you're doing great." Well, you know what? It took me nearly 20 years to figure it out. To get my, really to get my head screwed on right is what it was. But when you are under financial pressure, or you are under pressure from a manager to increase your production, there's great psychic distress going on in a person's brain. When they get in front of a potential buyer, they project that stress into the conversation. You can't keep it from coming across. And when you feel that pressure, you tend to press, you tend to hard sell, you tend to do all those things that reinforce the concept of what a salesperson is in the mind of the buyer. So I would not encourage anybody to do that. I would encourage people to put their money in a bank and know that they have enough money to live off for 6 months or a year or whatever if they don't make a sale at all. When they can do that, they can relax and focus their attention on the needs of the buyer and really become a problem solver and a helper to the buyer instead of trying to figure out what their pitch is going to be.
Yeah, and it's kind of a dichotomy because on the one hand, we're saying that someone needs that burning desire, and a lot of times it comes with a traumatic event financially that causes you to never want to be embarrassed again, to never want to have to ask or have to do that particular thing again for money. And on the other hand, the other side of the dichotomy, we're talking about having stability and security so that you can actually walk away and say no if it's appropriate to a person in a consultative fashion. So it's an interesting dichotomy, Steve. Where do you see that in regards to financial services salespeople? Is it better to have that little bit of embarrassing pressure, or is it better to be completely? And I almost think that sometimes people get lazy if they're too successful already.
Well, there's a couple of things there. Number one of the characteristics of top performers is they're extremely competitive. I have had clients who have their financial needs taken care of if they never make another dime. And yet they continue to produce at a high level because they're competitive. I had one of them say to me, he said, I go to these awards. Now, this was a top of the table. So your guys know what top of the table is. So this guy had never made top of the table. He had been in business at that time, I think 20-something years. He said to me, I go to the meetings and these guys walk across the stage as top of the table and they can't wear my jock strap. I said, at this time, he was, he's doing well anyway. So I said, so why do you want to make top of the table? He said, I just want to make it so I can say that I made it. I said, so it's all ego with you. He said, yeah. And I said, and you want to pay me money to coach you to do that? He said, that's exactly what I want to do. He said, I know what to do and I know how to do, but I want to pay you to hold my feet to the fire, to do what I know I need to do and to do what I know how to do. But his motivation was ego. Now, who am I to pass judgment on what his motivation is? My job was to help him achieve what he wanted to do. Now, to your point, and this will answer the question, he achieved that result, and he quit coaching with me after that. His income the next year dropped $100,000 a year, and he did not make top of the table because he didn't have anything to replace it with. So yes, it's good to be in an environment, competitive kind of individual, but at the same time, you have to have your own motivation, and there's always a new motivation that you start over with every year. If you're looking to grow your production, there's got to be a reason you want to do that, and it's got to be a personally compelling, emotional reason that you are absolutely excited about. And it can't be external from someone else. It's got to be your own reason.
Yeah, that's we're thinking on the same lines, because what motivates me might not motivate the next person. They might not have a burning desire to establish themselves as better than where they grew up, or and the other person might have a motivation to help more people that are in need. So they're trying to win sales so that they can actually give more money away. And I believe that you're 100%. That burning desire comes from within. It can't be dictated to or delegated.
Yeah, and I think that burning desire, that's why it's so hard for these athletes to retire. Their bodies won't perform anymore at the level that they're accustomed to, but they still have that burning desire to compete. So they hang on and they hang on, most of them well past the time that they're effective, because they can't give it up. And I see that with business people too. People say to me, you do the math with what I said. I started selling on my 30th birthday on November 24th, 1980. So do the math real quick. You'll know how old I am. I'm as excited about doing what I'm doing right now as I've ever been. In fact, I'm more excited right now than I've been in a while. Not because necessarily the money. Yes, the money is important. But I couldn't fish all the time. I couldn't play golf all the time. but I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and closing a sale is the most fun thing you can do with your clothes on.
I concur. I concur. That's terrific. That
I mean,
is,
it just jacks me up to close a deal.
yeah. I think everyone. I mean, I do too. So I would assume that everyone does. They get that sense of accomplishment, achievement. You get validated that what you're doing is correct, and that you actually can win. So,
Yeah, the
I
psychologists call that ego strength.
ego strength. Yeah.
Because when someone buys from you, what it means is you have been successful in getting someone to think the way that you think, and it reinforces the belief that you have in yourself that what you're doing is absolutely the right thing, and that these people are believing the way that you do.
Yeah, ego strength. That's terrific. Hey, before we go to the round and third base on the show here today, I want to ask you one more question, Steve. What are some of the cardinal sins that salespeople make to sabotage their success?
Well, I actually have a training on that called the 10 Cardinal Sins of Selling. And, we won't have time for all 10 of these, but what I'll do is I'll give you kind of a handful of those. Number one is that salespeople talk too much. And they tend to ramble on, and they tend to dominate the conversation. And as a result of that, they're not asking enough questions. They're not asking enough of the right questions. And the thing that I teach folks is that you have two ears and one mouth. The ratio of the amount of time you should be talking versus the amount of time you should be listening is roughly 2-to-1. So the way that you get to do that is you get really, really good at asking questions of people. The other thing that they do, I call it show up and throw up. Salesperson walks in and they are so proud of what they're selling and what their marketing department has given them that they go in and they vomit all over the buyer or prospect, and then they want to understand or they don't understand why the buyer doesn't buy. So that's another big one that they do. So in today's market, one of the cardinal sins is not having an effective lead generation or client attraction process. The marketplace has changed. No longer is selling about soliciting. You don't want to be solicited. I don't want to be solicited. I don't want somebody banging on my door. I don't want someone calling me, trying to sell me anything. So the whole world has changed from client solicitation to client attraction. And most salespeople, most companies don't have a client attraction process. The other thing that salespeople do is they don't operate from a proven selling system. Every profession has a way of doing business. Accounting has double entry bookkeeping. Architect has a certain way they're going to do things. Doctors have a certain way they're going to do things. They examine, then they diagnose, then they prescribe. Salespeople don't examine at all. They just prescribe. And they make that decision when they get out of their vehicle to go talk to somebody what they're going to prescribe without ever doing the examination and coming up with the right diagnosis. So selling, to do it the right way, you need an effective selling system. Now, we have one called a New School Selling System. There are a number of them out there. Is ours absolutely the best in the world? I don't know, because I hadn't seen them all. It's pretty good. It's made me a lot of money. It's made a lot of my clients a lot of money. But you need to have a system instead of showing up and winging it. And by a system, I don't mean going in and giving a product demonstration. That's not a system. That could be a piece of it. So, our studies show that about 85% of salespeople operate without a clearly defined system. And by that, I mean step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And we don't talk about step 4 until we talk about the others. People want to know, how much does this thing cost? Well, that's it. That question doesn't deserve to be answered until we talk about, well, what's the problem in the first place? Because it doesn't matter if what I have is free if you don't have a problem that I can solve. So we talk about we need to uncover pain before we talk about how much it's going to cost. We need to uncover the pain. We need to talk about what the decision process is. Then we can go forward and talk more about what it is we do. The other thing they do, that salespeople do, is they're not very good at asking powerful, piercing, penetrating questions to uncover emotional or psychic pain. Number one is they haven't been taught to ask those questions. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know when to ask the questions. They don't know to whom to ask the questions. And even if they do know who to ask them to and what they are and when to ask them, they don't have the guts to ask them. So the difference between a salesperson and a consultant is the consultant asks the very powerful questions that put the prospect on edge in terms of what their issues are. Very much like a psychologist. I've been referred to many, many times. In fact, it's in my tagline on my email. I've been referred to as a sales psychologist because before I got in selling, I was a professional therapist. And selling and being a therapist is the same business, basically. The only difference is the great salesperson makes a lot more money than the great therapist. So salespeople don't know how to ask questions, whereas therapists are taught to ask questions. Another weakness that salespeople have is they are uncomfortable discussing money. They think it's rude to ask somebody, "Hey, Mike, that's a nice tie you got on, man. How much you pay for that?" I don't know where you grew up, but where I grew up, you'd wash your mouth out with soap if you did that. But as a salesperson, you got to ask the buyer, "Well, how much money do you have here?" Or another one, "Who's actually going to make this decision? I'm talking with you. Who else besides you is going to be involved in this decision process about whether or not you work with our company?" And by the way, before we go much further, we probably need to drag them in here and have that conversation with them. So that's another one. So, poor self-image we talked about, limiting belief system. People think 2008, boy, the economy's terrible. Things are going south on us. Well, in reality, it's one of the greatest times in history to make money because everybody else was sitting on the sidelines. So that's just a self-limiting. I spend my time, Mike, coaching people and training people to get their heads screwed on straight before I try to teach them new revolutionary sales techniques that they want to employ. So we got to get their heads screwed on straight to begin with. And that's most sales training fails on that. Most sales training is really product knowledge training, that's not sales training.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, especially as a wholesaler, a lot of the time what we see is call it a roulette wheel or merry-go-round, and these companies are just trying to find the right person that can go out and sell their product, and they really don't invest in training the right person mentally to get their head on straight, and then giving them the product information to go out and become a formidable member of that team.
Yeah, and the reason for that is it takes time, it takes money, it takes energy, and everybody wants a quick fix. And you can't you can't do a quick fix on somebody's mindset. You got to work on that a bit. I mean, I guess if you got hit by a bolt of lightning, Saul got hit by a bolt of lightning on the way to Damascus and it changed him. But I don't think we can count on that for that happening to us as salespeople.
Yeah, unless you know how to generate lightning. But those are some very powerful nuggets that you've given to us, and I want to say I appreciate them personally. I'm sure that the listeners do too. I'd like to at this point transition, and I have two signature questions for you, Steve. And I ask all of the guests these questions, and some of the answers are pretty enlightening, and some of them are pretty entertaining. So I think we might get a mix from you as well. But if I could, I'd like to ask you the first question, and it's very simple, and you've referenced it a couple of times actually here. But if you pick the phone up, Steve, you pick the telephone up, and on the other end of the line was a 30-year-old Steve Clark, what advice would you give to your 30-year-old self?
Well, now, am I trying to sell them, or am I trying to, what, I'm just,
Well, let me rephrase it. If you pick the phone up and on the other end of the phone answers yourself when you were age 30, what advice would you now give to yourself when you were age 30?
it's something that I've come to. I didn't have it at 30, but it's something I've come to since then. Um, and that is, make a commitment that whatever you're going to do, you're going to do it with all of your energy, and you're going to totally sell out to do that thing and be good at that, and not be discouraged with setbacks and failure, and realize that the only way you're going to succeed is by failing enough times until you finally figure it out. So don't quit. Fail as often as you can, as fast as you can, but make sure when you fail, you fall forward and make some progress and learn from it. And if you do that, that's fine, because after a while, you will finally figure it all out when you quit making all the mistakes.
Yeah. That focus is something that I'm even dealing with myself, instead of having so much randomness, but to go all in, to totally sell out, like you said, would be what you would tell yourself. That's moving. That's moving. The second question actually is a little bit of a novelty here, but I want to put it on the side here, and I want to ask one more question about your business that I just missed. And here's the bit: you call the business New School Selling. Yet you, sir, are definitely an OG. You are from the old school of selling. So how'd you come up with the vernacular of new school selling, and what does that mean compared to old school?
Well, I came up with it because I wanted to take the position that I wasn't like everybody else. And the stuff that I was teaching wasn't like anybody else. I referenced this earlier. I don't know that there's another person on the planet that is a sales trainer that has a professional therapist training background and actually did therapy as a profession before they got in selling. So I looked at that and I realized that that skill is not being taught in sales training. And I can take that skill and I can marry it with sales training and have the best of both worlds, and really get people to address the real issues, which are, as you said a minute ago, the real issues are looking at themselves in the mirror. And what I would say to anyone, I say it all the time, if you don't like anything in your life, if you're unhappy with anything, your weight, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your relationships, your financial situation, go look in the mirror, because that's where the problem is. Now, when I say that, people want to hit me in the mouth. So I stand far enough away from them that they can't do that when I say it. And then I say, well, that's that's the bad news. The good news is the solution to all of those problems are looking at you in the mirror. So you can pick. You can piss and moan and whine about how terrible it is, or you can pull your pants up and go to work on yourself. And when you go to work on yourself, it's amazing how much better the world seems to be.
That's words of wisdom. I think it was Napoleon Hill. I was listening to a Napoleon Hill story, and he talked about a guy that was essentially homeless. And Napoleon Hill said essentially, or someone that he was talking with said that I have someone I'd like you to meet, a person that can change your life, that can give you all of your dreams and all of your desires, the person that can help you more than anyone else in the world. And he took him upstairs essentially and showed him this full-length mirror. And the guy got it. And then I think it was a year later, the guy came back and he was clean shaven. He was wearing a nice suit. He was freshened. And he thanked him and he said, hey, that moment right there changed my life when I realized that if it is to be, it is up to me, kind of a vernacular.
Well, that's what happened to me when I had my water turned off. That it's just an instant thing. It's like, okay, I'm the one responsible for this problem. I need to straighten this out. I need to get serious about selling. And that's the day I committed to being in sales, even though I'd been in sales for 2.5 years.
What a great day. What a great day. Here's the second question, Steve. Here's the second question. If you could have any superpower, which one would you choose? And what would you do with your superpower?
That's a good question. I don't have a ready-made answer for that, but I think it would be along this whole area about mindset of being able to get people to let down all of their guard and all of their pretentiousness and all of the defenses they put up and see themselves as they really are, accept themselves as they are, and then decide how they want to change themselves and go about doing that, making the commitment to do that. I don't have that superpower. I don't think anyone has that superpower. All we can do is put it out there, preach the message. Some will get it, most won't, and accept the fact of the 80-20 rule and realize that most of the people are not going to get your message, whether it's you or me or Dan Kennedy or anybody else. Most of the people are not going to get it. Just accept that, but don't tire of preaching the message.
That's well said. That's well said. Then that's the therapist mixed with the sales trainer, mixed with the good old boy in you coming out. So appreciate that. In fact, I'd like to take a moment here, Steve, and to really just to say thanks. You know, I've been watching you and following you ever since the Peak Performers was started back in the day with Lee and Bill. And, I appreciate it. And I'm sure that a lot of people do. So appreciate the many, the years of leadership and mentorship, the coaching and consulting that you do. And I'm sure you've helped thousands of people to do it, even indirectly. So I think that I can say that we appreciate you very much. And I speak for all of us when I say thank you, Steve, for doing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And thanks for coming on the show today. Definitely appreciate that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to get in touch with Mr. Steve Clark, what would be your preferential way, Steve? I know you're all over the internet, so then you're not hard to find. You're not hiding. But what would the best way be for someone to reach out to you for consulting or for coaching or for anything of that nature?
Yeah. The best way is to just send me an email at the initial S, Clark, C. L-A-R-K, selling, SELLING.com, newschoolselling.com, S Clark at newschoolselling.com.
Got it. Appreciate that. And, one last thing too is you've got a lot of your different programs and different books and different things of that nature. Is there anything that we could look forward to that you're working on that we can look forward to maybe for later, I don't know if it's later this year, later next year, or what's in the future for you?
Well, I'm continually writing and working on my next book. So that's my goal is to continue to write and do that. So be looking for more books from me as time goes forward. Certainly training. I record most everything I do. So there's always content. I've got hundreds of hours of content archived in audio or video that I've done. So I'm just continue to do that. I'm just nothing new necessarily, just more of what I've been doing.
Well, wish you the best on your journey and to many more years of developing that content. I know that a lot of us consume it and do it. Definitely, as I said, appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you let Steve know. And I appreciate it as well. So if you'd like to support the show, you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. Go ahead and leave us a like or a review if you like, and definitely appreciate that, maybe a rating and such. If you did enjoy it, you can share it and, of course, subscribe to the show. Appreciate that as well. So with that, thanks for listening.
Mike, can I make one plug, one shameless self-promotion here? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take it away.
If folks would like to receive a free copy of my book, Profitable Persuasion, they can simply go to my website That is newschoolselling.com. I give the book away. And in full disclosure, I ask you to simply help me with the shipping cost, which is $5.95. I'm upside down on the book. I lose money on every book that goes out because it costs me $6 just for the book itself, plus the postage. So I just ask you if you want to help me with that a little bit. That would be great. But I'll send you an autographed copy of my book, and you can find that at newschoolselling.com.
Well, that's very generous of you, Steve. Appreciate that. And yeah, that was an unpaid promotion, by the way. There is no, I don't make a commission on that at all. Do I? I don't make a commission on that, do I?
No, you make the same thing I do, except you make nothing, but I lose money on that deal.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure it's full of great stuff. I'm sure it's just packed full of it. So again, I appreciate everyone for listening in. And as always, thanks for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And of course, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.